Hey guys, this is your fiery friend the Infernoman here, and if you're into games, you're right where you need to be. But before we get into it, if you like the content that I put out there, I would greatly appreciate it if you hit me up with a like, or even better, subscribe to me. It really shows that people do care about my content. Now, if you have questions, comments, stuff you'd like to see played or discussed, you can @me on Twitter or chat directly with me as I stream 2 to 3 times a week on Twitch. A visual link for those are up on the screen right now, and I will have direct links in the details below. And for today's video, we're going to be going over cycling. You've probably already seen this many times from playing Standard. So the good news is, for those of you that did play this deck in Standard, you can use the same deck in Historic. I know, your mind has probably been blown right now. But anyways, the main reason why we're doing cycling now, almost a year after it was introduced thanks to Ikoria, is because of Flameblade Adept. This was added in from the Historic Anthology set that just recently came out over the weekend. So now, there is a little bit more of a reason to actually utilize this. But before we get into that, let's explain, of course, the breakdown. As always, we will cover the creature spells first in the deck. They will go over the non-creature spells, the land base if applicable, the sideboard. We'll have a match with Sparky to show you what the deck is trying to do, and of course at the very end, if you are interested in this deck, how you can upgrade to something better. And with that, let's start our cycling journey. And as always, we're going to be starting off with your creature package. You're going to be utilizing 16 creatures in the main deck, technically 17 if you want to count Loris, but we will talk about that a little bit later. Anyways, your turn 1 drops will be the Flourishing Fox and the Flameblade Adept. They basically do the same thing. Whenever you cycle a card, you're going to be able to make them stronger. The only difference, of course, is Flameblade Adept's ability is a +1/+0 and it's temporary, but the Flourishing Fox has +1/+1 counters. Also, the Fox can cycle itself, but the Flameblade Adept has a better evasion because it has Menace. For your 2 drops, you'll have Dran the Stinger and Valiant Rescuer in the main deck. Valiant Rescuer is great because it can create tokens to allow you to go wide, but the downside, of course, is you can only do it once per turn. Keep in mind that is once per turn, so that means you can do cycling on your turn once and cycling on your opponent's turn, but it is a little bit on the slow side. Dran the Stinger, however, doesn't have a limitation. Instead, it allows you to deal 1 damage to each opponent for every time you cycle a card, regardless of whose turn it is. Also, it has a better cycling cost of only 1 if you want to cycle it away, but the Valiant Rescuer has a cycling cost of 2. Either way, the game plan is pretty simple. Get 1 of these out and start tossing away your whole deck. I mean it. Cycle away everything. Alright, now let's check out what you are going to be cycling. Now, as for your non-creature spells, this is where things are going to be a little funky. If you've played this deck before, this shouldn't be news to you, but for those of you who haven't, let's go over briefly what's going on. The whole reason why you have a giant hodgepodge of different cards that you can't even cast, such as Memory Leak or Boon of the Wishgiver, is because they all have something in common. All these cards cycle for 1 mana of any kind, well, with the exception of Shredded Sails. But anyways, going over all of these just allows us to constantly cycle away all of our cards, and just help us get to our major payoff, which is the Zenith Flare. I'm sure, again, many of you have seen this before, but let's clarify one more time. Zenith Flare is a 4 mana instant speed card, which allows you to deal X amount of damage to any target, and you gain X life, where X is the number of cards with a cycling ability in your graveyard. So, you see where this game plan is? As I mentioned with the creatures, get a creature down, start smashing them in as soon as you can, cycle away your whole deck until you get to your payoff, which is the Zenith Flare, and then hit him hard to finish off and get a win. Of course, getting there is easier said than done. We'll explain, of course, why is that a little bit later in the video. But otherwise, the cards you can use, such as Footfall Crater, Gopher Blood, and Shredded Sails, actually do have double duty. 9 times out of 10, you're going to be cycling these cards specifically, but sometimes you do want to put on a land the Footfall Crater, which gives your creature an ability to have Trample and Haste. Shredded Sail is only single copy of because it costs actually a 2 mana cycling as opposed to the 1 cycling. But the advantage, of course, here is being able to get rid of an artifact at a pinch is great, and also sometimes you just got to get rid of a pesky flyer before you can get your win. Another option that you can also utilize would be the Gopher Blood. Gopher Blood, actually used on something like, say, your Flameblade Adept, is great because then you can pick off a weak creature that may have to chump block you, and then utilizing its Menace evasion forces your opponent to take the damage if they only have 1 blocker, just as a possible scenario. You can actually use these cards if you do have a better mana base, but again, we will go over that in the upgrade section. All right, so there you go. That's basically the game plan. Let's go over the land base for this oh so wonderful budget deck. As far as your land base is concerned, since we are running a budget, this is going to be as simple as we can be. Some plains, some mountains, 1 copy of Forgotten Cave, 1 copy of Secluded Steppe so we can actually do cycling, and 4 copies of Windscar Crag. For this deck, since we are running a low mana base of only 19, we really don't want to have too many tap lands because we want to make sure we get on our land drops early and when we can just focus on just cycling away the whole deck. So that's why I would highly recommend only using Windscar Crag. Don't add in things like Guild Gates. Don't add in things like the other common tap lands. This is really all you need. All right? All right, let's go over now the sideboard. Now, as far as your sideboard plan is concerned, as I mentioned before, you are going to be utilizing a companion, which is going to be Loris. So that's the reason why we are only using creatures in the 1 or 2 drop slot for that restriction. But otherwise, your sideboard is going to be pretty simple. You're going to have 4 copies of Fragmentize. There's a lot of turn 1 artifacts and enchantments that are going to be a pain for you to deal with. So we want to get them out as soon as possible. This mostly should hit the majority of what's currently in the format. If there's any artifacts or enchantments you can't hit because it's maybe 5 mana or higher, at that point you might be losing the game, just as a FYI. You're going to be utilizing Soul Guide Lantern. Again, this is your graveyard hate to get rid of enemy graveyards, and also it does let you draw a card. Copies of Draneth Healer, again, is going to be if we need to deal with something like, say, Burn. Whenever you cycle a card, you gain 1 life, and it cycles itself for 1. So really just mix and match, depends on what matchup you're going to be dealing with. And finally, 3 copies of Cast Out. Cast Out is very expensive for 4 mana, but it does have Flash, and also it can cycle itself for 1. So utilize this as your kind of your catch-all spot removal. All right, and with that, now it's time for the best part of the video. Oh yeah, it is Sparky sparring time. Woo! And here we go, everybody. As you already know, we're going to be fighting Sparky. Now, I know some people out there are going to be saying this right now, and I'm going to get ready to make you cringe right now. Yes, technically, this deck tech is going to be, what would you say? Recycled from standard to historic? You guys love these jokes. But anyways, going back to our opening hand here. So this is what you want to do for the opening hand. You want to be able to at least get ready to start cycling as soon as possible. We can do that on turn 1 with the Mountain, and it's the only land we have that actually doesn't come in tapped, but we actually don't have a payoff. So I would highly recommend to at least get 1 of your creature payoffs and some cycling options for you. So let's go ahead and do that. Ooh, okay. So this hand's even better. We got the Zenith Flare, we got the Flame Blade, we got the Flourishing Fox, only 1 copy of the Boon of the Wishgiver, but we do also have a Forgotten Cave to cycle. So let's go ahead, let's keep this hand. All right, so what do we toss away for now? At this point, you're going to have to then make a hard decision. Considering our opponent is Sparky, I'm going to anticipate they might actually try to have removal. So we're actually going to drop the Flameblade Adepts. It's okay. We'll hopefully get some more copies to get later on. All right, then it looks like they're playing green. Okay, so here we go. Mountain. And we're going to pass. Remember, again, don't feel like, although we want to have the Fox out ideally on turn 1, it's not the end of the world here because we already have our payoff at the very end. So let's go ahead and let's cycling begin. Cycle away the Forgotten Cave. One of the advantages also of playing cycling is your opponent cannot interact with the cycling. So therefore, the moment you can start doing this, they are kind of stuck. All right, with that, we got the Draneth Stinger, which is great. All right, now we can start kind of just whittling our opponent's life total down, which is going to be really nice here versus Sparky. All right, looks like they're putting in all their fun, generic little creatures here. Come on, Sparky. There you go. Good job, Sparky. You attacked. I appreciate that. Okay, all right, great. We got our land. It's a plains, which means we can put in the Fox. Fox comes down. Let's go ahead. Let's start our cycling now. Start aggressively doing this. Pump up our Fox. Cycle into another card. Ideally, perfect world is you just want to continually cycle, and you should be able to keep the process going without much else to do. So here we go. Startling development. Cycle again. There you go. Your triggers go off. Fox gets stronger. Stinger starts pinging. They should have called it Draneth Pinger, not Stinger. Oh, come on. You guys like these jokes. All right. Remember, again, we're not attacking here because we don't want to lose our creatures to this. Just focus on the game plan. Let the Fox do the blocking here. Although I'm anticipating Sparky might actually have a pump spell too. Oh, look at that. Sparky came prepared. Bad Sparky. You're not making us look good. All right. We'll take the damage this time. I'm anticipating Sparky's going to have something else. In a pinch, if you absolutely have to, you can also use your Zenith Flare to get rid of a creature, but you don't want to do that too often. All right. Windscar Crag down, gain some life. Let's get down. How do we want to do this? Let's actually cycle our extra Fox because we already have 1 threat on the field. Pumps it up. All right. We got 2 Footfall Craters. We'll cycle them both. You can see right here, as you are cycling away, don't forget, your Zenith Flare is going to get stronger with each card you cycle. So it is now at 7. And also, our Fox is now a 6/6. So we go smashing in. All right, we are getting close. Now, if your opponent does start trying to wipe your board, I didn't mention this, of course, in the parts of the deck tech earlier, but you can also pull in Loris if you absolutely have to bring back 1 of your cards that you may have cycled away, primarily, okay, in your Flourishing Fox, your Stinger, or even a Footfall Crater in a pinch if you absolutely need to. But it really just depends on the matchup. Okay. All right, I think we should be able to win this turn. Let's see if we can pull this off. All right, cycle away the Memory Leak. Pump up the Fox. All right, it's currently at 8. Let's see, can we do this? Boon of the Wishgiver. Cycle. Pump the Fox. All right, so we actually cannot win this turn. Not yet. Let's just go attacking now. They're obviously going to have the block here, knowing Sparky. Yep. No surprise there. Which is fine. All right. Yep. As you can see, cycling is not a very complicated deck. It is literally just... it's literally just throwing away your cards just to make something stronger. All right, we definitely now are in range. Even if our opponent here threw out everything in their hand, even if they got a pump spell, there's nothing they can do at this point because we already have the win in hand. All right, so there you go, guys. I know it wasn't super crazy, nothing super complicated, pretty easy. Let's just go ahead and let's just finish this off. I actually just want to get the swing in. Let's see if they do anything crazy out of you, Sparky? No, nothing? Nothing? All right, that's fine. But again, even if they had to block here, it's not detrimental anyway, because you can see right here, the Zenith Flare is already pumped up to 12, thanks to all the cards that were in the graveyard. Hit them to face, they die. There you go, guys. Super easy cycling for you. Let's get ready and talk about the upgrades. Now, as far as upgrading the deck, the only thing you really just want to upgrade is the mana base itself, because the cards that you noticed that we couldn't use, such as the Boon of the Wishgiver, were actually in blue. And one of the sweet things about this is, if you actually do manage to upgrade the entire mana base to Shock Lands and Pathway Lands, and maybe even a couple Triomes you can get away with, you can actually make your deck much more flexible than what the current version is. And that's actually something that some people really underestimate about the cycling deck, is a lot of them mostly just focus on the simple game plan of cycling, which again, I know that's what the whole point of the deck is, but there's going to be moments where you're going to have to take a pause and you're actually going to have to utilize cards to either disrupt or draw normally. It really just depends on, again, the matchup. Also, one particular card I didn't mention that you could consider is Blitz of the Thunder Raptor, because it does synergize with all the cycling cards, which are all the sorceries and instant cards that you have to dump into the yard. The only downside and reason why I myself did not use Blitz of the Thunder Raptor is this card is still a little bit limiting, in the sense that, yes, it can hit creatures and planeswalkers, but however, it is absolutely useless if they get exiled out of the graveyard from Graveyard Hate. Also, one of the biggest threats to this entire deck besides Graveyard Hate is Narset. Narset shuts down the whole plan 100%. So in theory, you can use cards like Blitz of the Thunder Raptor, but the reason why, again, is if that whole graveyard gets exiled and Narset comes in, this is a dead card. So I would rather bring in from the sideboard, as I saw earlier, the Cast Out. Cast Out, while expensive, does at least synergize with the cycling plan, and also it can at least temporarily get rid of those Narsets. Getting those off the field is priority to ensure that this deck can actually win. But otherwise, that's all I got for you guys in terms of upgrades. Literally, it is just a giant hodgepodge of Shock Lands, some Triomes, and the Pathway Lands. As far as what the ratio is, well, that really just depends on how you want to utilize the deck, and depends on what you have available to you. Because as you already know, lands get very expensive if you're trying to craft them from wildcards. But the good news for that is, at least they're all useful. If you do want to figure out, though, what priorities you should have regarding your lands, I do actually have also a video that I did on that way back. But of course, maybe in the next month or so, I'm probably going to update that again once Strixhaven comes in, assuming they do bring in more lands. And there you have it, everybody. That is cycling for you. A deck that was already pretty good in standard, but with a couple of small tweaks can be utilized in historic. But what do you guys think? Are you actually a fan of the cycling ability? Do you actually enjoy this deck? Is this actually something that you do like seeing me do, where I recycle a deck that was good in standard that can be utilized in historic? If nothing else, however, I do want to remind you guys, cycling here is nothing compared to what we used to deal with. See, this is where I'm going to sound like an old man Infernoman, but back in my day, we actually had two specific cards when I actually used to play during the Onslaught block, which was Lightning Rift and Astral Slide. These two cards dominated in terms of cycling. Oh man, imagine if we got those actually in this. Then we'd have a real cycling deck. But anyway, sorry, that's just me reminiscing. Otherwise, thanks again for watching, guys. Be sure to like and subscribe if it helped you out, you learned something, or at least I entertained you. And remember that no matter what you do play in the game of life, always be sure to burn bright. Later.